Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to another FinSuite Plus session. Today, I am very excited to have a friend and a well-known member of the Webflow and design community, someone who you probably know from either his time at Reloom, building the Reloom Design League, hosting various different community initiatives around the Webflow community, or now his recent role at Webflow. I'm excited to invite Josh Loh.
Hey, Jesse. Thank you for having me. Super excited for this talk.
FinSuite, agency, product, community. That's effing sweet.
I'm excited today to chat through something that I think both of us are very interested in, but I think uniquely applies to kind of your recent story, which is pursuing your kind of creative passions and things that you are gifted and skilled at, and kind of navigating how to follow those through different career changes and, what comes up and that kind of thing. So maybe we can jump in with a little bit of your background. I know that a lot of us probably found out, about Josh Loh when you joined the Reloom team. But what were you doing before Reloom?
Yeah, so I'm going to take it back a few steps, but before Reloom, I was basically just freelancing Webflow projects and was a product designer at a dental startup. So just doing like UX, UI design work, and I was doing that for about 4 years. And prior to that, I switched careers from civil engineering. So I did that for 7 years. So within that 7 years, I did 4 years in the mining industry, which, is just like a random mix of different things. And I covered this on the FinSuite interview way back when with Joe. And then 3 years in the high-rise residential construction industry. So but yeah, I've done like a whole bunch of different stuff. I was a big nerd in like Excel, just did a lot of calculations and all that stuff. And I needed a creative outlet. So during the 7 years, I was doing videography and just doing like wedding gigs, corporate promotional videos and things like that. That was kind of like my outlet then. So yeah, that's a bit of my background.
So you kind of wrestled with, or juggled, I should say, a couple different creative pursuits then. So you had like photo and video, and then I'm sure, within that civil engineering role, there was some sort of creativity with working with those data sets and all that information. So it's interesting. I think one of the things that I would like to chat about today is, the things that you're very interested in now. Where did those kind of stem from, or maybe when did you start to realize those interests?
Right.
So we'll kind of jump into that here in a second. But one of the things that we wrote down when we were prepping for the session was kind of this idea around, at least for me, as I've gone through career changes, there are creative interests or passions, skill sets that I've kind of always had. And there's some that I've picked up along the way. And I realized that some of my newer interests, my newer creative interests or passions, are just kind of like the next evolvement or like the next step from an interest that I had way in the past. And so an example of that would be when one of my first roles out of college was I worked at the university that I went to, and I started to develop an interest for, data analytics. And I think this stemmed from an interest that I had started to develop in high school because I was in this program for engineering and architecture. It was kind of a mesh of that.
Okay.
And one of the things that they taught us in this program was drafting. So how to like do blueprints or, modeling different things. And it's a creative thing because you're kind of designing in a way, but it's also very technical. And so, then, fast forward, I developed this interest in data analytics, which is a very technical thing, but it also has a lot of kind of design and creative thinking in how are you going to tell the story that this data holds, you know? And then fast forward to, you know, now where I'm very interested in web design and web development, which again is kind of like that match between here's a technical thing and a creative or design focused thing. So yeah, I'm wondering if there are, you know, what are some creative passions that you've held onto for a long time? And then, you know, are there some new ones that you've picked up along the way?
Yeah. First off, I love that background. We kind of have a similar background because I pursued engineering because I actually wanted to get into architecture. But at the time, Canada didn't have like a architectural undergrad, so engineering was like the next best thing. And I heard that it paid more than you know, architecture grads. So it's interesting because I think right there in engineering is like, well, the traditional sense, you're building something at the end of the day, and you're taking like an idea and then you're taking constraints and you're putting it together. I think that's where the creativity lies, is because true creativity, in my experience, is really comes from like managing the constraints and the variables within it. So, so yeah, that's interesting. My interest, I think, if I was to really think of like a common theme, at the end of the day, it's really like creating environments. So, like I grew up in the church, and so where with like worship and stuff like that and music, we'd bring in and, you know, create like an immersive experience or environment where like the music and people are just really in a different space. Or like I got into videography, and I think that's like a really cool thing too, because you're creating like a whole world and creating a storytelling. Down to my engineering, you know, pursuits, where it's like you're building you're shaping the built environment. So I think at the end of the day, it's really all about like creating environments, because for me, I think like if there's like a few truths that I always go back to, and I think one of them is like people are a function of their environment. So if you can shape and create like a good environment, you can shape and create like good people or like good thoughts and stuff like that too. So that's why I'm like a big nerd, and a lot of us are, with like office setups, because, you know, you have really nice space, you get inspired. So I would say that's kind of been like my primary theme, is just building environments. And then from there, it can be applied to, you know, different areas, depending on different like technologies and stuff like that, right? So like I shared, like videography, that's more of like on a screen. Same with websites, that's just on a screen. But now with like introduction of 3D and all that stuff, that's just like a whole, it opens up. And so, and then if I pick at it more, I think it's really all about like putting on a show for me. Like I said, like church, it is like a production. And then even with my wedding, I remember like I did like 80% of the planning, where most couples,
which is
like
unique.
Yeah, exactly. So the bride would pick out all the details, but I was like really into like the floor plan, the flow of the people like at the registration table, and then from there, like, do they, you know, go into like a lounge area and things like that. And I just love the way, like it's creating an experience for people. So that's like the application for like wedding. And then when I switched into tech, I didn't know anything about that coming from engineering. So I just decided like, I'm just going to start an event. So I just hosted events, and I invited local industry experts. And that was kind of like the puzzle pieces that kind of played into what I do now, which is like live stream hosting and interviewing people. But at the end of the day, it's like basically putting on a show, like a production, an experience. There's a time frame. So yeah, those are kind of just some common passions that have like evolved over time.
Yeah. And it's so interesting to think about, like, you know, creating environments, putting on a show, you know, setting the scene for people essentially, you know, in a way, creating a platform for other people. And how, you know, it's so easy to, you know, see how that connects to what you're doing now with either the digital third or with your new role at Webflow. So yeah, what are some like very clear ways you're seeing that come through in your new roles?
I'm still currently defining that right now. It's constantly like experimenting, especially now Webflow. There's higher stakes and there's new formats that I'm pushing, and it's interesting. And also the speed build challenge, I'm working on that. That's like my mega project. So I think I'm just maintaining what it is now. I think at the end of the day, it's really just highlighting and spotlighting good talent and good people and telling their story and finding ways for people to connect to that story. I think that's always like the human element to it. And then just adding like as much visual elements to that, a visual layer. Because it's one thing to just hear and listen to a podcast, but when it's on video, you got to make it worthwhile for people to watch. So just trying to find interesting ways to make it pop.
Yeah. It's a whole nother, element to the experience. And that's cool. One of the things that I've kind of learned or, picked up from mentors of mine is when you're trying to figure out like, what do I do with my life, or what direction do I go in? What do I pursue? One helpful thing to do is to think about areas where your skill set and your passion meet. So there are things that we're naturally like inherently gifted in, talented in. So you could have a very specific skill set, and then kind of separately, you have things that you're interested in. For me, for the longest time, I was, very interested in visuals and photography, and but I also have an interest in, or I'm skilled in, certain things. And so, how do I combine these two and come up with something? Do you have any experience with that kind of thing?
Yeah, I have to reference a few tools like personality assessment tools, because I think that is really, really helpful. The first one is got it from Christo from the future, the ikigai. This is like a Japanese framework where it's like it's a Venn diagram. You guys can Google it. It's intersecting of 4 different areas of what you love, what you are good at, what you can be paid for, and what the world needs. And so if you can do that, that basically just like meets all the intrinsic needs of like a human person. Because if you can find a place where actually you're talking about passions, the intersection of what you love and what you're good at is your passion. And that's good, right? And then people do passion projects, but then that may not pay the bills, right? So then what's the intersection of that? And so that could be your profession, right? What you're good at and what you can be paid for. So I think there are these like itches that we have, and it's important to find avenues to like scratch those itch. Even like at Webflow, there are areas where I may not be able to express myself as freely, and so I have like other channels or avenues to do that. So that's ikigai. That's one. I really recommend people check out Strengths Finders. I think now it's called Gallup Clifton's. So essentially, it's like you do like a 20 or 200 questionnaire survey, and it's one of those things where it's different from Myers-Briggs, like that ENFP, INTJ, all that stuff. Whereas those change, but when you take the Strengths Finder, it kind of takes like your intrinsic strengths and summarizes it. I think in there's 34 strengths, and then they highlight like your top 5 strengths. And when you identify that, it's just so important like to know what you're good at and what you're not, because especially when you even put yourself in a team, you can partner yourself with other people that complement your weaknesses with their strengths. So just having clarity in like what you're good at and knowing yourself more is so helpful in paving a path for your career.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think those are like the two main areas. I can keep
cool.
going. Like I love all the stuff, but I'll stop there.
Yeah. That's awesome. Another question. If your current role doesn't allow you to kind of scratch that creative itch, like you were saying, what are some things that, people can do?
Yeah. Just in your spare time, just work on stuff like passion projects. For example, for me right now, my challenge is I don't have enough time because I have 2 kids, but just like I just came back from Singapore. I was traveling for 3 weeks and I saw so many amazing like design inspiration. So I took a picture everywhere, or I bought some design books and just like going down to Figma like an hour a day and just practicing and designing like poster design or layout design and just like breaking things apart or just like try to build a website from scratch and copy a site that that you like. So I just like take time to just work on your craft. But if it's hard, then join a community that supports those interests as well, because that makes it really easy. That was game changing for me, like joining the Webflow community, because the first 4 years I wasn't plugged in, and literally the moment I joined, it was with Pierre de Montal. I don't know if he's in this community once in a while, so shout out to him.
Yeah.
He was the one that's like, hey, have you heard of like Webflow and Twitter? And I did not join Twitter at all. So I joined it 2 months later. Then there's a bit of my story of like how I'm in this position. It is amazing what community can do. I found out about Reloom, and then I just cold DM'd him, and he was looking for a product designer to build his component library system. So I pitched him for that role, but then I also pitched him another idea for live streaming, and then he was more interested in that, and that was kind of the rest is history. That was how I got into Reloom, and then now from Reloom I work at Webflow, and that was like literally 2 months from joining Twitter. So some takeaways is if you don't see opportunities of like a job, or if it's within your job to like scratch that itch or whatever, that the passion, create opportunities. I think we're in the creative field. I think that's probably the most powerful thing. It's like, if you don't see it, just build it yourself. Just do it.
I totally can relate to that. If you don't see an opportunity, then create it. Going back to when I started to kind of develop an interest in data analytics, at the time, my role was not that. It wasn't data analytics. I was working as an admission counselor for the university. And I was developing this interest, this passion, and slowly kind of developing a skill set with it. And I was like, man, this is super interesting to me. Could be a career path moving forward. How do I create an opportunity with this? And so I saw a need within the university to do some data analytics for enrollment specifically, looking at, how we were doing events and recruiting and all that kind of thing. And so I basically just pitched my director I wrote out like a little essay and gave some examples and, here's how we could pull data. Here's how we could, present it. Here are some of the decisions we could try and make from this data. And long story short, they basically created this new role for me to do data analytics. And that was out of nowhere,
Yeah.
But it was an interest of mine, and I just took a shot at it and, got lucky, and, it happened to work out in my favor, which was really, really cool. And long story short, that eventually helped me develop a lot of other technical skill sets and things like that. And then I think another example of creating the opportunity is kind of how I found FinSuite. Similar to you, I heard, hey, this design development community is massive on Twitter. Got to join. So I jumped on, sure enough, they were right. And so I started to kind of get into Webflow, following different developers and people who are using Webflow. and FinSuite was just popping up everywhere. I think is an experience that other people have had as well. I'm like, man, this would be pretty cool. So I was looking for a role at that time, and FinSuite didn't have a careers page. We didn't have like any kind of jobs page, or there was no way to say, hey, I'm looking to join the team. And so I just filled out the project inquiry form, like, that you would, if you were a company and you wanted to work with FinSuite, you would put your budget, your project scope, all that kind of stuff in. I filled out that form on the website as if it was my job application.
Okay, nice.
So I just created my own opportunity there. And, one thing led to another. And, I've been on the team of FinSuite for a couple of years now. So, I think
awesome. I love that.
On, like, if there's not an opportunity in front of you, just create it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's what I'm learning more and more is taking initiative, going forward, embracing like the unknown, and just like just shooting your shot and see where it takes you.
Yeah. I feel like Matt from 80/20 is another great example of doing that. He's got some pretty cool cold outreach stories working with Hassan Minaj and some other pretty notable companies. Definitely check him out. Someone that we both look up to kind of creatively and for creative thinking and, following your passion, figuring out what you're going to do is Erwin McManus. Great dude. I know that you went to one of his events last year. That looked pretty sweet. It was cool.
Yeah, pretty. So that's a whole story too. I mean, in terms of just like shooting your shot and stuff like that too. I obviously am a big fan of Christo, so I follow him, and then he posted it. Just the clip of Erwin. I don't know who this guy is, and then like the things he said is like, oh, okay, really insightful, really cool. So I checked it out, and then he basically runs this church in LA, but it's so unique. And what he's doing, at the time, he just launched this new thing, which isn't really like faith-based. It was like a business mastermind type of thing, but he is embedded in the creative realm. I mean, like lots of experience in the film industry and fashion design, so much so that he's actually like one of the coaches, like a personal coach of Jerry Lorenzo, who is the creator of Fear of God. So all you like street fashion people out there, that's huge. And he knows so many people. So I'm like, who's this guy? It's really fascinating. And so
it's crazy.
He launched this group, which kicked off less than a year ago about a year ago, actually, called The Arena. And it's essentially just bright minds. It is mostly about like communicators and teaching people how to communicate clearly and telling stories and things like that. But it was a unique place to just what they call it's the arena. It's the place where ideas are tested in the arena. So it's about sharing big ideas and all that stuff. Anyways, that's Erwin. Really, so I joined and I got just blasted by all his insights. One of the things that like I really took away from him is don't focus on outcomes, because I mean I'm just everywhere it's all about like doing OKRs, focus on your goals, and that's good, but I think if you just mainly focus on the outcomes, it's like a 50-50 chance of you being depressed, because if you don't achieve the goal, then you're gonna be really disappointed,
right?
Like that. So but rather focus on who you're becoming to achieve and reach those outcomes. And I think that just like speaks volumes, and it's a lot of wisdom there. Also, he also says, focus on like the vision of something, or the essence. It's hard to quote him. Focus on the intention. The intention of what you're doing rather than the strategy, because strategy changes when circumstances and situations change. So if you always focus on the intention of something, and you're doing big things and you're taking initiatives and you're creating opportunities and you want to be a leader, that's something I learned, is just to like focus on more on that than the strategy or the outcome.
Yeah, that's really cool. I feel like that meshes well with this idea that I recently heard from kind of a solopreneur named Jordan O'Connor. Follow him on Twitter. If you guys are interested, definitely give him a look. But he posted this article on his blog, and the kind of main idea was that luck will find you working, and that, you know, people who would consider themselves lucky are generally just people who are constantly working towards, you know, what they're going after. And he kind of referenced the story of David and Goliath, which most people would know. And, you know, how David, he was just out in the field tending to his flock, which has tons of, you know, experience in terms of, you know, you've got to protect this flock of sheep, you know, from different animals. Maybe a bear comes up, whatever. And so for years and years and years, this is what he's doing. He's just working. And then kind of all out of nowhere, he gets called up to fight because his country is in war with this other nation, and the other nation pulls up this massive guy named Goliath. And they're like, you know, who's going to take this guy out? And so David ends up being the one that gets picked to do it, and he takes out Goliath. He's just this little guy, normal dude, takes out Goliath. And the idea that Jordan was kind of leaning on was that, you know, it seems from the outside that David wouldn't have been prepared for this, but he's been working for so many years for an opportunity like this. And he's been developing strength. He's been developing skills. He's had to ward off different things. And, you know, he may not have seen the end picture of, okay, my skill set that I'm developing in this work by consistently working is going to amount to me fighting off Goliath. But in the end, that was kind of what happened. That's what he was able to use it for.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to think about that and think like, you know, there are skill sets and passions that we're pursuing now that will probably turn into something different than we can even imagine in the future, you know? And it kind of meshes into what we've been talking about. Have you seen anything in your past that you know, started to follow, or an interest that you started to lean into that kind of turned into something different, and maybe, you know, you've realized it in a different way today?
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. I think there's a balance, right? I think this is kind of your typical story of people deciding to go freelancing, right? And or running their own agency or whatever, like quitting their job and go freelancing, or picking a niche and just sticking to that, right? And like fighting the temptation to do everything in order to you know, meet the demands out there. I do think, like I say, it comes down to like knowing yourself and like understanding what your strengths are. So using like assessment tools like strengths finders, stuff like that, knowing what you're good at. Because I've been studying personal branding for like pretty intensely the last little while. And I think if you were to, first of all, I do think the future of marketing is like personal branding, because, you know, everyone's marketing themselves more, and the tools are being more powerful where you can do that. But and to do that, you really need to understand like what you're good at, and you have to be authentic to who you are. And so if you're comfortable in your own skin, like, you know, for the example, like David, and I know that story pretty well, there's one, you know, detail where the army is like, hey, put this big armor on. And he's like, he rejected it. Like, no, this is like, it's not me. It's too big. It's too clunky. I'm just going to, you know, wear my shepherd clothing and stuff like that. And like, you know, he probably was offered like a big sword, but like, no, he stuck to a slingshot because that was like his specialty.
Right.
So I think there is something to knowing what you're good at and sticking to it, staying in your lane and developing it. And then it's true, it's authentic. You're not like, yeah, and you kind of avoid imposter syndrome. and then just wait until the opportunity comes. And when the opportunity comes, then you're already prepared because you've been doing it for years and years. So I think that's a good way. I think that requires a lot of self-assurance, a lot of patience, a lot of, all that. With that said, though, I could say, hey, I want to be, I don't know, this chef or that specializes in a certain cuisine, but I'm in this industry of tech. So like, you have to know that there's some area of crossover where that probability of like that gig will happen is likely. So I think I just read a book actually. It's about how to kind of advance your career, kind of exactly what we're talking about. So if you are in a job, just stick to it, and that kind of obviously covers the practical stuff, pays your rent and all that stuff. And then on the side, work on something that is kind of related but not. And then like you with data analytics, work on that until you have like a competent level of a skill set, and then see if you can like shift over, and eventually what becomes your hobby starts to become like a side project, which then evolves into larger opportunities and stuff like that. So there are examples right now is like AI. So, spend time perfecting your skills as like a AI prompt specialist or something like that, and then see where those opportunities are actually in demand and see the overlap, and then that's where you would kind of shift. So, and again, it has to just align with your passions and what you like. So
for sure. Yeah, I think one thing that you noted was it really does take patience. Like, I think we overestimate, how does this saying go? We overestimate what we can do in a year, but underestimate what we can do in 10 years. That kind of thing. So it's like really switching our mindset to think long term and have patience to sit through that, and to work at developing skills and pursuing creativity. One thing that a mentor of mine said is that if you stay in the game long enough, or if you stay in the right place long enough, it will eventually be the right time.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of people are like, success stories are often they were in the right place at the right time. And so how do you get to be one of those people that's in the right place at the right time? You just put yourself in the right place and stay there long enough for it to be the right time. And then it'll eventually be the right time in the right place.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I mean, just speaking to my transition out of engineering, which was a huge, huge move. There were only so much opportunity there, right? And you just kind of look at the landscape, and I was dying inside near the end of my 7 years. Because I think my personality definitely wasn't like your typical, civil engineer, just clocking in and, crunching numbers on Excel and things like that. So it was a struggle. And I think for me, it took me 7 years to realize, okay, this is painful. There were days I would just like wake up in bed and just question like, how am I going to drag myself out of bed and go to work? It was brutal. And I think you have to get to that point. Well, hopefully for most people, they don't. And just like I said, it comes down to like really knowing yourself. Because there's guilt. There's a lot of reasons that could stop you and keep you in those roles, in the positions that you're not happy in. But either you have to be brave enough to step out and say, this isn't for me. I'm going to do something else that's true to me. Or you got to wait until the pain of the existing environment is so bad that you have to go. So, I would say like have a vision and work towards it, and just keep working on yourself.
Yeah, that's good. I want to talk about generosity. I think being generous is something that is incredibly underrated. And I feel like in a lot of ways, I've been kind of trying to pay attention to this, but I feel like in a lot of ways, generosity is almost like the world's currency, in a way.
Okay.
So, I've just seen in people that I look up to, in leaders that I follow, that the most generous people are generally the happiest and generally the most fulfilled people that I know.
Okay.
And, so it's like, how have you seen that come to play? Or maybe how have you seen, because I know you also hold this value, but how have you seen generosity come to benefit you? Because it's almost like a reverse, thing where it's like the more you give, the more you receive, kind of way. So yeah, maybe talk about that for a minute.
I love this topic. It's interesting you brought it up. I recently just kind of had a clear epiphany around this generosity. So I think at the end, there are certain like laws that are at play. So there's, I don't know if you've heard, but like the law of reciprocity. So if I like do you a favor, you like unconsciously just naturally want to like, give me a favor back just because it's just natural. Like I scratch your back, you scratch mine. So there's that at play. But obviously you don't be nice and generous to people, expecting them to
totally
get back to you. I think true generosity is like, you really want it to just give value. At the end of the day, it's value. It's like, and value can be subjective to different people. So you have to really understand like, what is it that you're giving that really, that they value. And I think, money comes into this because at the end of the day, money is a measure of value, right? So as long as you are just always giving value to people over and abundantly, naturally with like just the simple law of reciprocity, it will eventually come back. You can't control when or whatnot, but it's just like doing goodwill. Alex Hormozy, this is like his shtick now. Like he's all about doing things that's like propping up his goodwill measure. So yeah, it's really interesting. I fully believe in it. I think the more generous you are, the more people want to help you. And it really comes from a place of, you have to come to a place of like abundance. So I think it's a mindset thing as well, because it can be a long-term thing. Again, if you're like short-term and you're very transactional in your thinking, and even like the way we deal with clients and stuff like that, it's like, oh, well, you're calculating every move and every gesture or deal. Like, that's not, like no one likes that. So I think if you just go the extra mile and help people out and give them amazing value, it'll somehow come back. But just don't expect it. Just give because you want to give. And I think that's the main thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because it's, generosity is a very selfless thing, but in a way it is also kind of selfish, because I think generosity fills your cup,
right.
With our faith background, we kind of have this analogy of a cup, and so by being generous, my cup is being filled. And like you said, it kind of overflows. And so when my cup has enough in it, obviously it's going to overflow. And that is kind of, that overflow has to go somewhere. So that just goes out to the people around me. So generosity, it's really interesting.
And you said generosity, the most, something like people who are most generous are most fulfilled, something like that.
Yeah.
I think we're designed in that way. There was a story I heard from one of the Shark Tanks. I forgot his name. Anyways, one of the sharks. I mean, obviously all those guys are really successful, but at one point he was really depressed and like, he's a super ultra rich guy. And then he saw this homeless person like down the street and then decided to help that person. And that like small act actually lifted him out of depression. And so and that's just a simple act of service, right? So I think we are in the service industry. I think if we are to really truly want to serve people and like have a heart to actually be generous and want our clients or our friends or whoever we're helping to win, and are genuine and authentic about that, first off, I think it takes the focus from us to other people. And I think the more focused we are of ourselves, the more depressed we are, with this like selfie generation and all that stuff. So I think those are like the elements I've kind of observed of why serving, like true service, actually leads to fulfillment and happiness.
Mm-hmm.
That's my take. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love it. So maybe let's pull this back in, and how, what are some very practical ways that you have seen or been able to use generosity within like your day-to-day, your career, pursuing your creativity or being generous with your creativity? I think a very easy example would be how FinSuite is generous with knowledge and education. And so we have a massive YouTube channel, all this free content. Somebody could go on, watch all this, and have a great foundation for how to build very technical things in Webflow, how to start an agency, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, do you have any examples of that?
Oh man, put me on the spot here. I mean,
it doesn't have to be for yourself too. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like to be honest, that's a good challenge for me actually, to be more generous, like practically. Because right now for me, I think it'll be similar to what you said. Because that's my role, is to be generous in knowledge and helping people. I think I always try to share content that's very practical, because at the end of the day, yeah, I want people to take in the information and actually apply it and have an impact in their life. So that's where I'm looking to do that. Also just meeting up with people, even in like just the team members at Webflow. Some of the people, they do so much, and some of them don't get acknowledged, with all the hard work that they do. So I try to just acknowledge them, just say, hey, I just appreciate all that you do. I think that simple gesture actually goes a really long way, just to show people you appreciate them, and you see how much effort they're doing. So that's like a small thing. I mean, it's hard to represent like Webflow and stuff like that. But even like say when I was at Reloom, like we were just giving access to the component library. There's like a freemium plan and stuff like that, and like showing them how to use it. That's huge. So
yeah. Back to your comment about just like reaching out to your team and being like, hey, hope your day's going great. That's just a kind gesture. Isn't it wild how far kindness goes? Like, I can't tell you, I feel like I was lucky to go to a school and kind of be in a circle of influence that taught leadership, kindness, generosity, all these principles that we're kind of talking about. And so it felt like these all were kind of normal things for me, but I didn't realize how uncommon they are. And so, just having a kind, accountance to you, or countenance to you, or, making a kind comment here and there, it is crazy how much that actually gets noticed.
Yeah. Even a practical thing of like physically writing a letter or a card to say thank you. I've heard of friends doing that, and like it would bring people to tears. It's crazy.
Yeah. Wow. That's cool. Well, maybe you can tell us, like, what are you excited about for this new role? Like maybe you can tell us a little bit too about the journey of how you got to be on the team at Webflow, and then we can talk about what some of the things you're excited for.
I wanted to do my more live stream production stuff, and actually have this amazing idea of helping designers get trained on all these skill sets. So I created the Digital Third. It's kind of creating a digital third space for people to connect and belong and equip each other. So that happened, and I had big plans for that. And then in the middle of that, then Emily Linetto from Webflow reached out to me and provided me an opportunity I couldn't refuse to work at Webflow. And so that's kind of how it happened. And that was just over a year ago. Yeah. And so, unfortunately, like I've just had so much change in the last 4 months. Because I moved to a new home, I had a new baby, now with a new job with Webflow. It's just so much change. And so unfortunately, I don't have enough time to manage the digital third. So I'm putting that on the side. And then now I'm just putting more of my resources on Webflow right now. And even Webflow is changing and shifting. I mean, with the rebrand, there's a lot of amazing big things happening. I mean, key people have come and gone, and I think it's just a natural season in this phase of Webflow just evolving. So that's cool to kind of be a part of. So yeah, that's kind of been my journey. What am I doing currently right now that I can kind of, well, personally, and I'm not ruining, spoiling anything, but yeah, I'm working on like the speed build challenge, and I think that's just reinventing that, tweaking it, making it more fun and engaging and inspiring for people to learn. So that's kind of what I'm working on at the moment. But I'm busy. I'm keeping busy for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and it's cool to kind of to circle this all in. Like, it's cool to think about the skill sets that you've probably developed over your past roles that are now going to help you so much in this new role.
This is the thing. They're speaking to like picking up new skill sets. That's really niche and unique. And that's like, for me, I love. I'll actually share the story. Yeah, part of my story of going into Webflow is how I picked up live streaming. So it all happened in the pandemic. Like I was just like anyone else in the tech industry or like a product designer. I was just like designing in Figma, working contract work and stuff like that. But there was no way to differentiate myself. And I wasn't looking for a way to like be super unique. But what happened was during COVID, everyone was doing podcasts. So a friend of mine who runs and owns a real estate company, he has his own podcast, and then he wanted to do some like his own personal one, and he just looped me in. And I've never done. He just thought I was like the tech guy, so he thought it was a good idea to bring me in. Never done podcast production before, but I was into it, and so I learned that skill set paired with live streaming. And everyone was live streaming, and most churches were live streaming during the pandemic. So just pairing those two skill sets of live streaming and podcast production, which is more like interviewing and things like that.
Yeah.
I was able to then have a unique skill set to offer. I was actually practicing on my own, doing my own design community, which is called Collab Collective. So I did that for like 3 months. It wasn't long, but I just, again, shoot my shot, and I reached out to all these like people. Back then it was with design buddies, Grace Ling, and she was like on the up and up. And now she's like, I don't know if you guys have heard of Design Buddies, but it's one of the largest like design communities, and she's blowing up. She's more in like to the Figma space. But those communities were all born out of COVID during that season. And so I think it's just like taking opportunities, creating opportunities, reaching out. So I developed that skill set, only 3 months practice essentially. And then at that point, I just offered it to do it for Reloom. And that was unique enough that Adam said yes. And then I had these other crazy ideas to do this, like, esports stuff. So I think just going off of like your interest and chasing after it, and then just trying it and partnering up with people that will actually support your ideas. Cause I'm forever grateful. Like Adam said, yeah, you want to do this Iron Chef concept for designers? Okay, let's do it. And so without that, I wouldn't be working at Webflow, because that's mainly why, they hired me. So yeah, anyways, all that to say is just like work on what you're doing now that pays the bill, and then chase your little passion projects, and then develop it well enough that you can actually, leverage it more to make you stand out.
Yeah.
And then just keep doing that at different stages of your career. It's funny, like,
That's
how
awesome.
did I go from an engineer to now? My wife's like, so are you a YouTuber now? So it's pretty funny.
Yeah, that's incredible.
It is crazy.
YouTuber Josh Loh.
It is really, really crazy how things have evolved. I just kind of pinch myself. So we'll see. We'll see how it continues to evolve like a year from now.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this conversation. I think it's been fun, and we'll have to do it again for sure sometime soon. But very excited to see, how you continue to grow in your role at Webflow and all of the, cool opportunities that you're going to create for other people.
Hey guys, this is Josh Loh, and we just wrapped up an amazing talk. I am the senior community advocate here at Webflow. Be sure to give it a like, subscribe to listen more to amazing content like this. And I want to say thank you for having me. Take care. Bye-bye.